If you've ever dreamed of getting perfect, poetic revenge on someone who wronged you, you're in the right place. Hit that like button, subscribe, and grab a cold one, because today's story, it's a masterpiece in petty justice. You ever get that feeling, the one where you know you're standing at the start of something big? Good or bad, you can't quite tell, but there's this heaviness in your chest, like the air itself knows something you don't. That's what moving into a new place felt like for me. It was late spring when we pulled into that crooked little cul-de-sac, the kind of neighborhood where houses still had peeling paint, and lawns were either overgrown or burnt down to brittle brown patches. A place with character. My wife called it a fixer-upper's paradise. But I didn't care much about the siding or the fence. I cared about what kind of people live behind those doors. Because you see, a man's life can be made or ruined by his neighbors. I didn't know it then, but my future was already sitting 20 yards away, perched on a faded wooden porch, shining a pair of beat-up combat boots. Doug, at first glance, Doug didn't look like trouble. Balding on top, thick neck, one of those guys with arms like hams and a gut that told you he still drank like he was 20. His sleeves were rolled up, forearms streaked with grease, a tattoo peeking out on his left wrist, a faded American flag wrapped around a dagger. The kind of ink you only get overseas, when you're young and dumb and think you're invincible. I respected that, maybe even admired it. I'd never served, but my old man was a Vietnam vet, and I grew up learning to recognize the weight some men carry. I was unloading boxes from my truck when I noticed him watching me, not staring. Just one of those quiet, measured glances men give each other. The kind that says, I see you. You see me. Let's not make this complicated. I gave him a nod. He nodded back, and that could have been the end of it. But life's funny like that. Some of your biggest mistakes don't come with warning signs. They start with a simple nod. I was halfway through wrestling a toolbox out of bed when I realized my throat was bone dry, sweat dripping down the back of my neck. The sun was merciless that day, high and mean, and my cooler sat there in the truck bed, condensation beating on its blue plastic lid. I popped it open, grabbed a beer, and on a last-minute impulse, grabbed a second. You drink? I called out. Doug grunted, a smirk playing on his face. Hell yeah. Always room for a cold one. I walked over and handed him a can, watching as he wiped his hand on his jeans before cracking it open. He took a long pull, eyes closing for a second like a man remembering a better time. We sat on his steps, swapping small talk. Turns out Doug was in the Army National Guard. Been to Iraq twice, Afghanistan once. Worked at a parts factory now, night shifts mostly. And you know what? He was easy to like. The kind of guy who called you brother after 2 beers and offered to help you move a couch you didn't ask him to. We talk about the Army. Well, he did. I just listened, nodding in the right places, letting him think I understood what sandstorms and convoy raids were like. And I guess in a way I did. Every man's got his own kind of war. We stayed out there until dusk, the sky bleeding orange and purple. Mosquitoes came out, and my wife called me inside twice. But I didn't care. It felt good to be seen, to be known by someone in this new place. I thought, for once, maybe I'd found a decent neighbor. I didn't notice, in those early days, how Doug always seemed to have an eye on my truck, how he asked what I kept in the back, made jokes about my cooler. I didn't notice the way he'd linger by the fence when I was unloading groceries, or how his smirk lingered a little too long when I cracked open a fresh case of beer. But that's how it works, doesn't it? The ones who hurt you worse start out with their hand on your shoulder, not around your throat. And looking back now, I remember one thing clear as day. It was the way he shined those boots. Most men, they polish fast. Swipe of the cloth, a dab of polish. Done. But Doug, he was methodical, slow, careful, almost tender. As if he wasn't just cleaning them, he was erasing something. I didn't know then that those boots would be the first warning, because any man who can wipe away the dirt so thoroughly, so quietly, can learn to hide other things too. That night, after we'd killed 4 beers apiece, he clapped me on the back and told me I was good people. I laughed, said the same about him. And I meant it. God help me, I meant it. I went inside, kissed my wife, and told her I'd made a friend. She just smiled, said, "Hope he's not one of those types." I didn't ask what she meant. I wish I had, because if I'd known what was coming, if I'd seen the snake coiled under that porch light, I would have never offered him that first beer. They say you never really know a man until you've shared a drink with him. Hell, around here, it wasn't just a saying, it was a test. And Doug passed it. At least, that's what I told myself. In the weeks after our first beers on that porch, Doug became a fixture in my daily life. It wasn't planned, wasn't formal. It just happened. I'd come home from work, tired, sweat-streaked, with sawdust on my shirt and ache in my back. And there he'd be, either tinkering with his old Chevy or sitting on that same porch with his boots off and a smirk on his face. "Long day, brother?" he'd call out. And every time, like clockwork, I'd crack open the cooler, grab a couple of beers, and make my way over. We started sharing war stories again. His real ones. My borrowed ones from my dad. After the second beer, it didn't matter whose they were. We talk about women, too. How mine worked too hard. How his ex-wife took the dog when she left. About jobs. About bosses we'd gladly bury 6 feet under if we could. It felt good. In a world where most men barely make eye contact with their neighbors, we had something rare. Brotherhood in a bottle. And I needed it. See, what nobody tells you about moving to a new town in your mid-30s is that it's lonelier than death. The old friends don't call as much. The phone stops buzzing. You start counting the conversations you've had in a day. And some days, the only voice you hear is your own. Doug filled that gap. We started doing small favors for each other. I'd loan him tools. He'd fix my lawnmower. He gave me a jump when my battery died in the rain. I bought us burgers when his paycheck came up short. It was easy, natural, and somewhere along the line, without me realizing it, the cooler in my truck became our cooler. At first, it didn't bother me. I'd see him grab one when I wasn't around, coming back from his night shift, working on his truck, sitting on the tailgate like it was his. "Hope you don't mind. Grab a cold one," he'd text. I'd laugh. Text back, "Always room for one more, brother." And maybe I meant it. Or maybe I was just too damn tired to care. But what I didn't see, what I should have seen, was how quickly a favor turns into a habit and a habit into a problem. I started noticing the cases ran out faster than usual. The cooler would be half empty when I got home, though I didn't remember drinking that much. At first, I blamed myself. Maybe I grabbed a few too many after work. Maybe I was drinking more than I thought. Stress will do that to a man. And when my wife made a snide comment one night, something about me going through beer like water, I laughed it off. Got to unwind somehow, I said, but it nagged at me. Little things started adding up, like the way Doug would ask if I'd picked up more beer before I even mentioned it, or how he always seemed to show up right after I got home from the store, how he never brought his own six-pack, even when he promised to. And there was this one time, clear as day in my mind, when I came out early Saturday morning to grab my cooler for a fishing trip, and it was lighter than it should have been. I cracked the lid and found 4 beers left. I knew for a fact I bought a fresh case the night before. My stomach sank. And then, right on cue, Doug strolled over, sunglasses on, coffee in hand. "Hey man, you heading out?" I want to say something. God, I wanted to. But what do you say? "Hey, buddy, you stealing my beers?" It sounded petty, childish, not worth the fight. So I said nothing, smiled, told him I'd be back by sundown. I pushed the suspicion down like a splinter under the skin. Figure it was easier to ignore than dig it out. But deep down, a part of me knew. I just didn't want to face it yet. And the worst part? I kept drinking with him. Even as my cooler emptied faster. Even as the unease grew. Even as my wife started throwing me those pointed looks at dinner. Because some part of me still believed in the bond we'd built on that porch. I thought we were cut from the same cloth. Soldiers, survivors, men who watched each other's backs. Turns out, Doug was watching mine for a different reason entirely. There's a strange kind of madness that creeps up on a man when the numbers stop adding up. And for me, it started with beer. I know how ridiculous that sounds. Hell, It sounded ridiculous to me, too, at first. But when something you rely on to unwind, to make the long days a little shorter, starts disappearing without explanation, it messes with your head. It started subtle. One Friday night, I bought a fresh case. 24 cold ones, sweating in the cooler by the time the sun went down. I had 2 before dinner, 1 after. Next morning, there were 17 left. I counted twice. I'm not proud to admit it, but I actually crouched beside that cooler in my garage and did the math in my head like some obsessed accountant. 24 minus 3 should be 21, but it wasn't. I called out to my wife. "Hey, babe, did you grab a couple beers last night after I went to bed?" "Nope," she yelled from the kitchen. "Why?" I told her nothing, shrugged it off, told myself maybe I miscounted. Maybe I'd had one too many. Maybe one rolled under the seat in my truck. But that nagging voice in the back of my skull whispered otherwise. Something's not right. I didn't want to believe it was Doug. I mean, who else could it be? The cooler lived in my truck bed or in the garage. Only a handful of people had access to it. But Doug was my friend. Wasn't he? We were brothers, bonded by those long evenings and cold bottles. We talked about loyalty, about having each other's backs, about how this world was full of snakes, and you had to stick with your own kind. It couldn't be him, except the missing beer said otherwise. And once that seed of doubt got planted, it grew like a weed. I started keeping mental tallies. How many I drank, how many were left. I'd open the cooler when I left for work, check again when I came home. And every damn time, the numbers dropped, sometimes by 1, sometimes 2, never more than 3 at a time, just enough to stay beneath notice if I hadn't been watching. And here's the thing about suspicion. Once it takes root, it poisons everything. I began noticing how Doug always seemed to be outside when I left for work. "Early start today, huh?" he'd say with a grin. Or when I came home, how he'd casually stroll over. "Man, you wouldn't believe the day I had. Got a cold one left in there for me?" I started lying. "Nah, I'm all out," even when the cooler was half full, and his face would twitch just a fraction before he laughed it off. "Ah, well, next time." I kept the cooler locked in the garage after that, or so I thought, because the beers kept vanishing. It got so bad, I started doubting myself. Am I drinking more than I remember? Is my wife sneaking them? Is it me? I'd lie awake at night, staring at the ceiling, retracing every beer I drank that day like some desperate detective. The stress bled into other things. I snapped at my wife over stupid stuff. I started coming home later, sitting in parking lots with the radio off, trying to decide if I was losing my mind. And it all came to a head one Tuesday afternoon. I'd driven my wife's car to work that day. Her shop was across the street from my job, so we parked near each other. She usually left before me, but that afternoon my phone buzzed. "Wife, call me. Now." I felt my stomach drop. I stepped out back and hit dial. "Hey, what's up?" Her voice was tight. "Your buddy Doug. I just watched him climb into your truck." "Wait, what?" "He went straight for your cooler, looked around, opened it, and stuffed a couple beers in his cargo shorts like it was nothing. Walked right back across the street like it was his." I didn't say a word, didn't even breathe, because in that moment, everything snapped into place. The missing beers, the casual grins, the jokes about my stash, the way he always knew when I bought a new case. And the worst part? I'd let it happen. I'd told myself for weeks that it couldn't be Doug. That brothers don't do that to each other. That neighbors like us had an unspoken code. But codes don't mean a damn thing to a man with no honor. I hung up the phone and stared at the wall. I felt something deep in my gut, a slow, twisting anger I hadn't known in years. It wasn't just the beer. It was a betrayal. It was every laugh we shared, every story, every time I called him brother. And right then, I decided I wasn't going to confront him. I wasn't going to shout, wasn't going to threaten, wasn't even going to swing. No, men like Doug don't learn from fists. They learn from consequences. And by God, I was going to teach him a lesson he'd never forget. I don't know if you've ever had a moment like that, where the world tilts just a little, when everything you thought you knew, everything you build in your head about a person, comes crumbling down in a single sentence. For me, it happened with a phone call. Doug stealing your beer. 6 words. That's all it took to change everything. I could hear my wife's voice crackle through the phone, low and careful, like she wasn't sure how I'd react, like she was trying to warn me, and at the same time, terrified of lighting the fuse. And in those few seconds after she said it, time seemed to stretch. The sound of the world faded. The hum of my office's ancient air conditioner, the muffled ring of a phone in the next room, even my own breathing. All I could hear was the echo of her words. Doug stealing your beer. I felt something hot and heavy build in my chest. A sick, twisting knot of rage and humiliation. Not just because he'd been stealing from me, but because I let him. Weeks of denial, of making excuses, of laughing it off. And now the truth stood there, naked and undeniable. The man I called a brother was a damn thief. And the worst kind, too, one that took from you with a smile and a clap on the back, pretending it was nothing while he robbed you blind. I clenched my fist so tight, I felt my nails cut into my palm. I could picture him in that moment. Doug, sweaty, grinning, slipping cans into those worn-out cargo shorts of his. Probably looking around like some petty teenager stealing from a corner store. I imagined walking out of that office, crossing the street, and dragging his sorry ass out onto the pavement, telling the whole damn block what kind of man he was. My blood boiled at the thought. But then another image slid into my mind. Him standing there, eyes wide, face pale, realizing too late what he'd done. And me, smiling back. No, a simple fight wouldn't cut it. Guys like Doug don't learn from a bloody nose. I wanted him to suffer, to question every sip he took, to feel the same violation, the same humiliation I felt in that moment. And that's when the idea hit me. It came so fast, so clear. It was like it had been waiting for me to get angry enough to see it. You want to steal my beer, Doug? Fine. I'll give you all the beer you can drink. Special delivery. Recycled. A dark, ugly grin tugged at the corner of my mouth. I could already picture it. Him cracking open a bottle, tipping it back, swallowing, and then realizing too late that something was wrong. That sharp, bitter taste not quite what he expected. And the best part? I'd never have to say a word. I'd let him figure it out on his own. Let him stew in it. Wonder how long I'd known. Let him guess how many he'd already had. Perfect. I hung up the phone without another word to my wife. Didn't trust myself to speak. I spent the rest of that shift with my knee bouncing, tapping a steady beat against the floor, counting down the hours until I could put the plan in motion. By the time the clock hit 5, I was ready. I stopped by the liquor store on the way home. Bought 2 6-packs of glass bottles. Not cans. Glass. It had to be glass. Something about the weight of it. The old school pop-off caps. They felt right for what I was about to do. I made polite conversation with the cashier. Smiled. Joked about the weather. All the while, my mind raced with the logistics. How much I'd need. Where to store them. How to reseal the caps without making it obvious. By the time I got home, the sun was starting to dip low, casting long shadows over the yard. Doug wasn't outside. Good. I didn't want to see his face just yet. I brought the bottles into the garage, set them on the workbench, and cracked one open. Took a long pull. It was decent. Would have been a waste to pour it out. I finished 3, setting the empties aside. Then came the real work. I grabbed the funnel from my tool drawer, the one I use for oil changes, and cleaned it thoroughly. Then, in the most undignified act of my life, I topped those bottles off of my own contribution. It wasn't pretty, wasn't pleasant, but it felt good, damn good. By the time I finished, I had 6 freshly filled bottles. I recapped them, wiped them clean, and stuck them back in the cooler, nestled among the legitimate ones. The trap was set, and now I just had to wait. I sat on my back porch that night, nursing a beer, watching the stars come out. It was quiet, peaceful, but under that calm surface, something dark churned. Not guilt, not even anger anymore. Anticipation. Because soon, Doug was going to get exactly what he deserved. And I'd be right here when he did. There's a particular kind of thrill that comes with setting a trap. The waiting, the knowing, the delicious certainty that any moment now, your enemy is going to step right into it. And best of all, they'll never see it coming. I woke up early the next morning. Didn't even need the alarm. My eyes snapped open before dawn, a sharp electric hum buzzing under my skin. The cooler sat in the garage, loaded and ready. 6 ordinary beers. 6 very special ones. I went through my usual routine like nothing was different. Showered, got dressed, kissed my wife goodbye. Pretended not to notice the way she eyed me like she could sense something simmering just beneath the surface. "You okay?" she asked as I grabbed my keys. Better than ever, I told her. And I meant it. I drove to work that day with a grin on my face. The world looked brighter. The sky bluer. Even the jackass who cut me off in traffic couldn't touch me, because I knew what was waiting for Doug. It wasn't just about the beer anymore. It was about principle, about betrayal, about teaching a man that you don't bite the hand that feeds you, especially not when that hand can turn around and slap you with a bottle full of recycled humiliation. When I got home that evening, the cooler was back in the bed of my truck. I cracked it open casually like I wasn't checking. 2 bottles were missing. 2. My stomach did a slow, satisfied flip. I didn't say a word. Didn't ask. Didn't even glance toward Doug's house. But I knew he'd been there, like a raccoon sniffing around for scraps. The next day, another one gone. By the 3rd day, 4 of those bottles had disappeared. And Doug? Doug acted like nothing was out of the ordinary. Still waved when I pulled up. Still made small talk about the weather and the ball game on Saturday. But there was something different. A twitch in his smile. A little more sweat on his brow. It was subtle, but it was there. That tightness around the eyes a man gets when something's gnawing at him and he doesn't dare say out loud. I'd see him glance at my cooler when he thought I wasn't looking. That old confidence gone. It was like watching a dog who knows it's done wrong, but keeps coming back to the table anyway. Tail tucked, hoping for scraps. I savored every second of it. The real moment, though, the one that made every warm bottle, every ounce of patience worth it, came on the 5th day. I was sitting on my porch as the sun dipped low. The air was heavy and still, the way it gets just before a summer storm. Doug came out of his house, moving slower than usual. He didn't look right. Face pale, eyes a little sunken, a sheen of sweat on his forehead that had nothing to do with the heat. He glanced toward my truck, then toward me. For the first time since I'd met him, he didn't smile, didn't nod, didn't even speak. He walked to his mailbox, fumbled with the lid, and pulled out a handful of junk mail. I didn't say a word, just watched. And then our eyes met. It was quick, a flicker, a brief electric connection. And in that half-second, I saw it. He knew, not the full truth, maybe. Not exactly what had been in those bottles. But he knew something was wrong. And he knew I knew. That knowledge settled between us like a loaded gun on the table. I raised my bottle in a casual salute. Took a slow, deliberate sip. Doug swallowed hard. His hand trembled just enough to make the papers in his grip rustle. He didn't say anything, just turned and shuffled back to his house, like a man carrying the weight of something too awful to name. And that was the best part. I didn't need to confront him. Didn't need to shout or accuse or throw a punch. The silence did the work for me. Because from that day on, no more beers went missing. Not one. The cooler stayed full. Doug kept his distance. And every time I saw him, that flicker of unease stayed in his eyes. A man haunted by the memory of what he'd done and what he'd swallowed. I'd won, without a word, without a fight, without breaking a single law, and it felt perfect. Funny thing about revenge, the best kind doesn't need a single word. It doesn't come with screaming matches or fistfights in the street. It isn't about blood or bruises or broken bones. The best revenge is quiet. It creeps up on a man, wraps around his throat like a noose he tied himself, and then it waits. That's exactly what happened to Doug. I didn't have to do a thing. After that day, after the look we shared by the mailbox, something in him broke. I saw it, clear as day. The man who used to swagger around with beer in hand, telling loud stories about Afghanistan and bar fights he won, suddenly turned small. The change wasn't obvious to anyone else. Hell, the rest of the neighborhood probably didn't notice at all. But I did. The way he stopped making eye contact. The way his porch stayed empty. How his truck didn't move as much. Even his dog, a scrappy mutt named Duke, seemed to pick up on it. Wouldn't come out to greet me anymore. Doug still nodded when he saw me, but there was no grin. No! Hey, brother, got a cold one for me? Those words vanished like smoke. He kept his distance. Left early for work. Came home late. Avoided me like the plague. And that suited me just fine. Underscore. But what really made it perfect was how I could tell he wasn't okay. I caught glimpses. Subtle, quiet cracks in his armor, like the way he'd glance at my cooler, then immediately look away, or how he jumped a little when I slammed my truck door too hard one afternoon. There was one evening, 2 weeks after the last missing bottle, when I saw him sitting alone on his porch, head in his hands, elbows on his knees. No music, no beer, no boots to shine, just a man stewing in his own quiet hell. And I wondered what was going through his head. Was he replaying those drinks in his mind? Counting how many bottles he took? Try to figure out which ones tasted wrong? Imagining what was in them? Good. Let him wonder. Let his imagination do the work. Because the truth is, paranoia is a poison all its own. And Doug was drinking it down by the gallon. It started affecting other parts of his life too. His truck, usually spotless, polished like a showpiece, sat gathering dust. The lawn, once neatly trimmed, grew wild. Dandelions pushing up between the patchy grass. I even overheard his boss at the parts factory came by looking for him one morning. Doug calling again? Said he was sick yesterday, too. I didn't offer any information. Just shrugged. Hope he's all right, I said, and meant it in the most ironic way possible. It felt good. No, it felt righteous. Because Doug hadn't just stolen my beer. He'd stolen my trust, my friendship, and he'd done it while smiling, while calling me brother, while pretending we were cut from the same cloth. This wasn't about a few missing bottles. It was about respect. And he'd lost his. Now, every time he saw me, he carried the weight of that loss. And I made sure to remind him, subtly, a raised bottle in his direction, a too friendly wave across the yard, a loud crack of a bottle cap being popped just as he stepped outside. Little things. Petty, maybe. But damn, it was sweet. The neighborhood felt different too. Without Doug hanging around, there was less noise, less boasting, less trouble. And for the first time since moving in, I felt at peace. Even my wife noticed. Doug okay? She asked one evening, glancing toward his dark porch. Seems quiet lately. I shrugged. Maybe he's finally sobered up, I said. We both knew what I meant. And she smiled, not the kind you give when you're happy, but the kind you give when justice has been quietly served. Underscore, 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 underscore. A month passed. Then, too, Doug stopped coming outside altogether. His truck barely moved. Rumor was he picked up a second job out of town. Someplace an hour away, night shifts. I didn't care. I'd made my point, and in the end, the silence was louder than any confrontation could have been. He never admitted it. Never knocked on my door to apologize. Never returned the beers he stole. But he didn't have to, because every time he crossed my path, I saw it in his eyes. The memory, the dread, the quiet suffering. And it was enough. It's funny looking back now, how something so small, a couple of stolen beers, could spiral into something bigger. Not just a prank, not just payback. A lesson, a reminder that some debts aren't settled with fists or shouting matches. Some debts settle themselves, quietly, in the dark corners of man's mind. Doug taught me that, and I don't think he even realizes it. Underscore, 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 underscore. A few months after all went down, Doug disappeared. Not in a dramatic, middle-of-the-night sort of way. No moving van. No goodbye. Just gone. One day his truck was there, sun-bleached and dusty. The next, it wasn't. The porch stayed empty after that. The lawn turned to weeds. His house sat dark and quiet, a dead tooth in the mouth of the neighborhood. People noticed. A couple of old-timers asked me about it. Doug skipped town? Haven't seen him in weeks. I'd shrug, haven't a clue. And that was the truth. I didn't know where he went. Didn't care. I wasn't interested in where his story led after our paths split, because by then the damage was done. And not to me, to him. Underscore, 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 underscore. You see, the beauty of what happened wasn't just in the act itself, the tainted bottles, the silent revenge. It was in the aftermath, in the way it festered. Doug wasn't the kind of man who could live with uncertainty, with not knowing who was watching or what they knew. He was a swaggerer, a loudmouth, a man who needed to be liked or feared, or both. And I'd taken that from him, without ever raising my voice, without breaking a single law, without anyone else even knowing what I'd done. That kind of revenge leaves marks deeper than bruises. It infects a man's pride, his sense of place in the world. It strips him of certainty. And Doug, for all his bluster, couldn't survive that. Underscore, 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 underscore. Sometimes, when I'm sitting on my porch with a cold one, I catch myself looking toward his empty house, wondering if he ever tells a story. If somewhere in some grimy dive bar 2 towns over, he leans across a sticky counter and says, "You want to hear something messed up that happened to me once?" If he does, I hope he leaves out the part where he stole from the one guy who treated him like a brother. Or maybe he doesn't talk about it at all. Maybe it haunts him in silence. Even better. Underscore, 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 underscore. And what about me? Well, I learned a thing or two. I learned people will surprise you. That sometimes the ones you let closest are the ones holding the knife. That trust is a currency, and when you spend it carelessly, it leaves you broke. But I also learned the power of patience, of silence, of letting a man hang himself with his own rope. I used to think revenge meant shouting someone down, or bloodying a lip, or breaking a window. But the best kind is the one that lets your enemy destroy himself from the inside. Doug taught me that, and for that, I owe him. Hell, maybe I'll even drink to him tonight. Underscore, 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 underscore. So if you've stuck with me this far, and if you've ever been burned, betrayed, or blindsided by someone you trusted, remember this. You don't always need to fight. You don't always need to get loud. Sometimes you just need to wait. People like Doug always hang themselves. All you have to do is hand them the rope, and when the time's right, raise your bottle, tip it back, and toast to cold karma, the sweetest drink of all.